There's some dark corners of comic book history that I've always been curious to research a little bit more information about. One such piece of lore that I've always been curious to dig a little bit deeper on is the publisher CrossGen. CrossGen was an interesting group of comics creators led by people who were really passionate about creating lots of interesting comic books. And sadly, the publisher was not in operation for very long. In fact, CrossGen published their first comic book in 2000 and folded sadly in 2004. And Disney actually picked up the company in 2004, and they were subsequently dissolved, into Marvel following. Today, Marvel has actually chosen to acknowledge the CrossGen line of comics with a brand new release featuring some reprinted issues and a couple other bells and whistles that I wanted to go ahead and explore. My name is Arco Braddock, and today let's go ahead and dive deep into CrossGen Tales #1. But before we dive any deeper into the video, want to go ahead and encourage you to subscribe to the channel if you enjoy our content. Also, why not go ahead and click that like button as well? All right, so now I want to just go ahead and talk a little bit about the series as a whole. So first off, I just want to tell my story about trying to acquire this issue right here, this CrossGen Tales #1. It was actually very tricky and took me driving to, a couple comic book stores. Really encourage you guys to maybe consider picking this one up sooner than later if you're really curious and kind of want to dive deep for more information. But just thought it was kind of interesting how, many comic book stores appear to be under ordering this. Maybe it's because this is just a reprint of a couple old stories from the very early 2000s. And I just think maybe not a lot of people are that interested in the issue overall, but there is some really fascinating material here. Sadly, there is a really steep price point on this issue. This is actually priced at a staggering $8.99. Want to go ahead and read off the solicitation text that Marvel wrote for this reprint issue. Surprising tales from a universe of fantasy, folklore, and science fiction, the debut issues of 4 of the signature titles from the 21st century's most innovative imprint, and some of the biggest names in comics, offer a window into other worlds. In Ruse #1, Detective Simon Archer and his assistant Emma Bishop face magic and mystery in the Victorian-esque planet Arcadia. In Mystic #1, meet sisters Genevieve and Giselle. One is a sorceress, one is a socialite, but their destinies are about to be transformed. In Sigil #1, a planetary union is locked in centuries-long war with the star-faring Saurians. And in Sojourn #1, the archer Arwen and her allies fight for survival in the shadow of the undead dictator for Mordath. But who are these sigil bearers, and how do they unite these 4 stories? All right, and I wanted to go ahead and just talk briefly now about the issue as a whole and some of the aspects about it. So first off, I did want to say that when you kind of open the issue, first thing you're going to see is the really vast and spacious credits page. But after that, there is a really fantastic foreword from Ron Marz that really kind of illustrates some of the dirty laundry at CrossGen, but also talks about how CrossGen was a really wonderful kind of place for creativity that was a little bit marred by the end. That being said, it's just really interesting to kind of get a behind the scenes look at some of these stories and a little bit of an impression of what it was like to work there before actually diving in and reading these issues in particular. So now I want to go ahead and just talk about some of these issues. I want to let readers know if, they're going to be interesting by modern standards, and what my overall impressions were of this CrossGen Tales book. I just want to say kind of at large that I did enjoy the issue overall. I think most of these series are actually pretty interesting. And if most of these launch today, I think that they might even have a chance to be successful. I'm really shocked at how many good ideas and how good some of the art and writing were on these cross-gen stories overall. And now let me go ahead and show off some of the covers for the issue. This cover is very beautiful. This is the actual cover for the issue that Marvel has. And this was created by Paco Medina and Matt Milla. So next up, I want to go ahead and just talk a little bit about Ruse. My apologies that some of these covers are so small. It was very difficult to find some of the original kind of source material because these books are so old and were published so long ago. So this first book was really enticing. It featured really wonderful writing from Mark Waid. We have some art from Butch Guice, inks from Mike Perkins, colors from Laura Martin, and letters from Dave Lanphear in this first issue. And it really nicely covered like a Victorian era look into Detective Simon Archer and his assistant, Emma. I think Mark Waid's writing in this series is really kind of up to date by modern standards. I loved how the publisher kind of introduces some of the cross-gen lore in this issue ever so slightly as the issue kind of starts to continue, and really just shocked at how consistent and well written this is from a writing perspective. Mark Waid seems to really dig deep into Archer's character and really develop some interesting like antisocial tendencies between Archer and like the rest of society. And readers are able to really get kind of Emma Bishop as the window into his really interesting character. I think out of all these comics, this Ruse series had some of the best art of the bunch. It's just so detailed and intricate throughout the issue. I love some of the really bombastic layouts as well. The really beautiful double page spread towards the end of the issue that really caught my attention. I think if Ruse was published today, it would have a chance at being success in today's modern market. I just think there's something interesting about this property that even translates all these years later. So the next issue in this collection is actually Mystic. Mystic is written by Ron Marz. We have art from Brandon Peterson, inks from John Dell, colors from Andrew Crossley, and letters from Dave Lanphear. Mystic centers around basically a group of sisters who are both part of a guild together. And basically, one of the sisters thinks that she's going to get the powers from the guild, but it ends up going to the other sister. Now, I have to say that the premise for this issue took a little bit to draw me in, but by the end of the issue, I was almost hooked. I was shocked at just how much this series that has a sort of kind of like mystic bend to it ended up, bringing me into the story as it continued. In modern comics, I feel like I see a lot of Brandon Peterson doing some 3D modeling, and I was really surprised to see that is not really a factor in this particular issue. But I really did like kind of like the more naturalistic, art in the title. And I think that this series really picks up steam as it starts to move to the end. So overall here, I think this creative team of Ron Marz and Brandon Peterson really deliver on this first issue of Mystic. I think maybe one of the biggest problems with it is it's got a super abrupt ending. And by the time the momentum really starts kind of connecting with me in the issue just ends. So hopefully that's actually some praise for the book and it gets better as it continues. This is another one that I would easily pick up off the shelf if Marvel were to kind of reprint it again. And just really enjoyed this second book in the CrossGen Tales anthology. Really enjoyed Mystic. Maybe Marvel will have a return to, Ruse and Mystic in the near future. I sure hope so. Or I hope they do what DC is doing with Wildstorm, where they're starting to bring the characters into the line here. But we'll see how that shakes out. And the next book that I have in the collection here is Sigil. This is from Barbara Kesel, and let's see. So it's written by Barbara Kesel, illustrated by Ben Lai, inked by Ray Lai. There's colors in the issue from Wil Quintana, and letters from Dave Lanphear. So I really thought that Sigil was probably one of the weakest books in the collection. It was very hard to latch on to the premise. And also, I really think that some of the artwork in this issue is not polished and not up to today's standards. It was particularly the anatomy on the art of the characters in nearly every single page. If you take a look at the cover for the issue, I think it's a really actually good representation of some of the artwork that's inside the comic book. I just don't think it's quite up to modern standards. And I think some of the writing glossed over the really interesting premise and kind of, made it so that I wasn't really interested in digging that deep into, the first issue of Sigil. Again, I think another issue that, some of these books have is just the fact that their endings are a little bit abrupt. Very similar to the other titles in the line. I really thought it was interesting how this issue ended with like that tease of like the actual CrossGen Sigil, and I'm curious to see like where that goes, but I don't know if I'm invested enough in this series to really kind of like move on any further here. However, this last book I was able to really connect with in a really kind of visceral way that I really enjoyed. So this last title over here is called Sojourn. It's written by Ron Marz. It has art from Greg Land, inks from Drew Geraci, colors from Caeser Rodriguez, and letters from Dave Lanphear and Troy Peteri. So I was really struck by what I found in Sojourn. I think the issue does just a phenomenal job pulling the story of Arwen and really establishing, her role as a character. It's really good to see a female character take center stage in a title like Sojourn, because it's such like a fantasy heavy story, really focused on one character, and typically these are more male centric stories that we see. So I really was able to connect with a lot of the emotions from Arwen throughout this individual issue. I think her story is really heartbreaking and really probably managed to connect readers at the time, because I did see that Sojourn was one of the best sellers amongst the CrossGen line of titles. I love how like the CrossGen lore is in here with the sigil. I think maybe one of the things in this issue that could pull readers away ever so slightly is some of the artwork from Greg Land. I don't know how much Greg Land's style has evolved over the years. And, I'm always kind of sensitive to the fact that Land was found tracing, some models, and it really kind of detracts from the overall artwork of the series. Would love to see Marvel, return to Arwen in the Sojourn universe, with Ron Marz and maybe some updated creators here. And again, just really love how each issue of the series brings in so much lore for the title overall. I think I'm actually shocked at how positive I am on this CrossGen collection. Really, I think the biggest kind of sad and part about this reprint overall is just the fact that it doesn't look like Marvel is really interested in continuing to publish CrossGen. I heard a rumor that this collection was published in order for Marvel to just make sure that they had the trademark or the rights renewed on this CrossGen Tales reprint. Nonetheless, I want to know if you guys got a copy. I want to know if you were interested as much as I was in some of these stories, and if you think that any of these stories really had kind of a modern connection to readers. This was one of my first times ever really digging deep into the CrossGen line of comics. So if anybody has, interesting stories about, their experience with CrossGen, I definitely want you guys to sound off in the comments. Thank you guys so much for checking out the video. I'll be back very soon with more wonderful comic book content. Thank you so much for checking out our videos, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.